Jake Morrison stood in the middle of his small ranch and looked at the land around him. The dirt was dry and the grass was a strange purple color that he still had not gotten used to even after 3 years on this planet. New Arizona was what the colony called it, but it was nothing like the old Arizona back on Earth. The sky here had 2 suns and they both made everything look red and orange when they started to set in the evening. His cattle were eating the purple grass near the fence and he counted them again like he did every day. 23 cows and they were all skinny and weak-looking. He needed at least 50 to make any real money, but he could barely feed the ones he had. The genetic modifications that were supposed to make them strong on this alien world did not seem to be working very well. Maybe he got a bad batch or maybe he was just a bad rancher. Either way, he was failing. Jake was 35 years old, but his hands looked like they belonged to a man of 60. The work was hard and endless and he did it all alone. Linda had been gone for 2 years now and he still missed her every single day. The fever had taken her in the winter and there was nothing the colony doctors could do. After that, the other ranchers in the area had given up and moved closer to the main settlement, where there were more people and better protection and actual stores. But Jake stayed because this land was all he had left of the dreams he and Linda had shared. The Vakrin lived on this planet long before humans arrived. They were tall and had 4 arms and their skin changed colors depending on their mood, or so the scientists said. Jake had only seen them from far away a few times. They looked strange and beautiful and scary all at the same time. Most humans called them the natives, but Jake thought that was rude. They were people just like humans were people even if they looked different. The colony government said the Vakrin were peaceful and wanted to be left alone. There had been a treaty or something that kept humans and Vakrin separated. The humans got the flatlands and the Vakrin kept the mountains and forests. Nobody crossed into the other territory and everyone pretended that was a good arrangement. Jake figured it probably was not good for anybody, but he was just a poor rancher and nobody asked his opinion about things like that. He walked back toward his house, which was really just a small cabin made of wood and metal panels that he had scrapped together. The roof leaked when it rained and the heating system only worked half the time. He had tried to fix it last month, but he did not have the right parts and he could not afford to buy them. Everything on New Arizona cost 3 times what it should because everything had to be shipped from Earth or the other colonies. Inside the cabin, he made himself dinner, which was dried meat and some vegetables from his small garden. The food was bland, but it filled his stomach. He sat at the table that he and Linda had built together on their first week here, and he ate in silence. The loneliness was the worst part, harder than the work and harder than the poverty and harder than anything else. He had nobody to talk to and nobody who cared if he lived or died. After dinner, he sat outside and watched the 2 suns go down. The sky turned a deep purple and then black and the stars came out. There were so many stars here and none of them looked familiar. Earth was somewhere out there, but it was so far away that it might as well not exist. He had left everything behind to come here and now he had nothing to show for it except a failing ranch and a broken heart. Jake thought about giving up sometimes. He could sell the cattle and the land for whatever he could get and move to the main colony. Maybe get a job in one of the factories or the mines. It would be easier than this. But something kept him here on this empty land under these strange stars. Maybe it was stubbornness or maybe it was just that he did not know how to do anything else. He went inside and lay down on his bed. Tomorrow he would wake up early and check the irrigation system by the river. It had been making strange noises and he was worried it might break completely. If that happened, he would lose what little water he had for the cattle, and then he would really be finished. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Sleep came slowly, like it always did. He dreamed about Linda, and about Earth, and about a life that seemed like it belonged to someone else. In the dream, everything was green and there was only one sun, and Linda was laughing at something he said. When he woke up, it would all be gone and he would be alone again on this alien world. The night was quiet except for the sound of the wind moving through the purple grass. The cattle were settled down for the night and the moons were rising in the sky. There were 3 moons here and they were all different sizes. Jake had learned their names once, but he had forgotten them. It did not matter what they were called. They gave light and that was enough. He thought about the Vakrin again before sleep finally took him. He wondered what their lives were like and if they struggled the way he did. Did they have families and dreams and did they lose people they loved? Probably they did because that seemed to be the way of things everywhere in the universe. Life was hard and people suffered, and then they died and new people came along to suffer in their place. Jake did not know that tomorrow everything would change. He did not know that he would meet the Vakrin face to face and that his life would never be the same. He just knew that he was tired and poor and alone and that tomorrow would probably be just like today. He was wrong about that, but there was no way for him to know it yet. So he slept and the night passed and the planet turned under the stars. Jake woke up before the suns rose because that was what ranchers did. The air was cold and he could see his breath in the darkness of his cabin. He got dressed in his old work clothes that had patches on the knees and elbows. His boots were worn down at the heels, but they still kept his feet dry most of the time. He ate a quick breakfast of hard bread and water and then headed out into the gray morning. The walk to the Silverflow River took about 20 minutes across his land. The river was important because it fed his irrigation system, and without it his cattle would have no water. He had built the system himself using parts he had salvaged from old equipment and some things he had traded for in the colony. It was not pretty, but it worked, or at least it had worked until a few days ago when it started making grinding noises. The grass crunched under his boots and the air smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. Everything on New Arizona smelled a little bit wrong to him. Not bad exactly, but different from Earth in ways he could not quite describe. Linda used to say it smelled like cinnamon and metal, but Jake thought it smelled more like dust and something sweet that he had no name for. As he got closer to the river, he could hear the water running fast and loud. That was strange because this time of year the river was usually calm and shallow. The spring melt from the mountains must have started early, and that meant the water level was high and dangerous. Jake made a mental note to keep the cattle away from the riverbank for a few days until things settled down. Then he heard something else. A sound that did not belong to the river or the wind or the morning birds that were starting to wake up. It was a splashing sound and then a cry, high and frightened and desperate. Jake stopped walking and listened hard. There it was again. Someone or something was in the river and they were in trouble. He started running toward the sound. His boots pounded on the rocky ground and his breath came hard. The river came into view through the morning mist, and that was when he saw them. Two small figures in the water being pulled along by the current. They were thrashing and fighting against the flow, but they were losing. Jake got closer and his heart jumped into his throat. They were Vakrin children. He had never seen Vakrin children before, but there was no mistaking what they were. They had 4 arms just like the adults, and their skin was changing colors, rapidly flashing from white to gray to pale blue. They were scared and drowning, and they were just kids. Jake did not think about the treaty or about what might happen if he interfered. He just saw 2 children who needed help. He kicked off his boots and threw off his jacket and ran straight into the river. The water was so cold it felt like knives cutting into his skin. The current grabbed him immediately and tried to pull him downstream. He fought against it, using all his strength to swim toward the first child. The water was rough and full of debris from upstream. A branch hit him in the shoulder and he felt something tear, but he kept swimming. The first child saw him coming and reached out with all 4 arms. Their eyes were huge and golden and filled with terror. Jake grabbed onto the small body and pulled the child close. The Vakrin was lighter than he expected, and their skin felt smooth and warm despite the freezing water. The child clutched at him desperately, and Jake could feel their heart beating fast like a bird. There was a fallen tree near the bank, and Jake swam toward it with everything he had. His muscles burned and his lungs felt like they were going to burst, but he kept going. The child held on tight and did not let go. When they reached the tree, Jake pushed the child up onto the trunk. The young Vakrin grabbed hold of the wood with all 4 hands and held on. Their skin had turned a slightly better color now that they were out of the water, but there was still another child in the river. Jake looked downstream and saw the second one being carried away by the rapids. This child was smaller and was not fighting anymore. They had gone under the surface and Jake could not see them. He took a deep breath and dove. The water under the surface was dark and murky. Jake could not see anything and he was running out of air fast. He reached out blindly with his hands feeling for anything solid. His fingers brushed against something soft and he grabbed it hard. It was the child. He pulled them up and broke through the surface, gasping for air. The second child was not moving. Their skin had turned completely white, which Jake guessed was very bad. He hooked his arm around the small body and started swimming for shore. The current was stronger here and it kept pushing him toward the rocks. His leg hit something hard and he felt pain shoot up his side, but he did not stop. He could not stop. His feet finally touched the bottom and he half swam, half crawled onto the muddy bank. He laid the child down on the ground as gently as he could. The small Vakrin was not breathing. Jake had never given first aid to an alien before, and he had no idea if their bodies worked the same way as human bodies, but he had to try something. He put his hands on the child's chest and started pressing down in a rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He had learned CPR years ago back on Earth, and he hoped it would work. He tilted the child's head back and breathed into their mouth. Once, twice. Nothing happened. He went back to chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then breath again. Come on, kid. Come on. Please. He did another round of compressions and another breath. The child's skin was still white and they were not moving. Jake felt panic rising in his chest, but he pushed it down and kept going. Compressions and breath. Compressions and breath. His own ribs were hurting and he thought maybe he had cracked one, but he did not stop. On the fourth try, the child suddenly coughed. Water came pouring out of their mouth and they started breathing again in short, gasping breaths. Their skin flickered and started to change color from white to a pale green. Jake sat back on his heels and let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. The child was alive. The first child had made it to shore and was scrambling over to their sibling. They made clicking and chirping sounds that must have been their language. Both children looked up at Jake with their big golden eyes, and he looked back at them. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then Jake smiled, even though he was shaking from cold and pain and fear. The children were safe, and that was all that mattered. Jake sat on the muddy riverbank trying to catch his breath. His whole body was shaking from the cold and from what had just happened. The two Vakrin children sat close together a few feet away from him, making soft clicking sounds to each other. They were clearly scared and confused, but they were alive, and that was what mattered. He looked down at himself and saw that he was bleeding from a dozen different cuts. His shirt was torn and there was a deep gash on his left arm that was dripping blood onto the mud. His ribs hurt badly on his right side, and he thought he might have broken one or two when he hit the rocks in the river. Every breath sent a sharp pain through his chest. The children watched him with their large golden eyes. Their skin had mostly returned to a normal color now, which seemed to be a mix of blue and green with some purple patterns. Jake guessed that meant they were calmer. He had heard that Vakrin skin showed their emotions, but he had never paid much attention to the details. Now he wished he had learned more about them. He tried to stand up, but his legs almost gave out under him. The adrenaline that had kept him going was wearing off fast, and all the pain was catching up with him. He managed to get to his feet on the second try, but he swayed and had to put a hand on a nearby tree to keep from falling over. The children stood up too and moved closer to each other. They were watching him carefully, like they were trying to decide if he was dangerous or not. Jake raised one hand slowly in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. He had no idea if Vakrin understood human body language, but it was worth a try. "I am not going to hurt you. You are safe now." The words felt useless because the children probably could not understand him, but saying them out loud made him feel a little better anyway. The larger of the two children took a small step forward and tilted their head to one side. They made a soft clicking sound and reached out one of their 4 hands toward Jake. Jake held still and let the child touch his arm. The small hand was warm, and the fingers were longer than human fingers with an extra joint in each one. The child's skin shifted to a lighter blue color and they made another clicking sound. Then they pulled their hand back and looked at their sibling. Jake realized he needed to get these kids back to their people. But he had no idea where the Vakrin lived or how to contact them. The mountains were miles away and he was in no condition to make that kind of journey. The children looked like they were in better shape than he was, but they were still young and probably tired and scared. He pointed toward his ranch, which was visible in the distance across the purple grassland. The children followed his gesture and looked at the small cabin. Jake pointed to himself and then to the ranch and then to them. He hoped they would understand that he wanted to take them somewhere safe. The larger child seemed to get the idea. They made a series of clicks and whistles to their sibling, and then both of them looked back at Jake and made what might have been a nodding gesture. Jake started walking slowly toward the ranch, and the children followed a few steps behind him. Every step was painful. His ribs screamed at him, and his legs felt like they were made of wood. He stumbled and nearly fell, but somehow managed to keep going. The children made concerned clicking sounds behind him. Then, to his surprise, they moved up on either side of him and each took one of his arms. They were helping him walk. These alien children, who had every reason to be terrified of him, were helping him because they could see he was hurt. Jake felt something tighten in his chest, and it had nothing to do with his broken ribs. He looked down at the two small beings supporting him and managed a weak smile. "Thank you." The walk back to the ranch took forever. The sun was fully up now, and both stars were heating the land. Jake was still soaking wet and cold, but the warmth felt good on his skin. The children stayed close to him the whole way, never letting go of his arms. Their skin kept shifting colors, and Jake wondered what they were feeling. When they finally reached the cabin, Jake pushed open the door and led the children inside. It was not much warmer in here, but at least they were out of the wind. He grabbed some blankets from his bed and wrapped them around the children. They clutched the blankets with all four hands and sat down near the fireplace. Jake got the fire going, even though it hurt to bend down and stack the wood. Once the flames were burning strong, he sat down heavily in his old chair and tried to assess his injuries. The cut on his arm was still bleeding, so he found some clean cloth and wrapped it tight. His ribs were definitely broken, but there was nothing he could do about that except try not to move too much. He looked at the children who were huddled together under the blankets watching him. They looked so small and vulnerable. He had no idea how old they were in Vakrin terms, but they seemed like they might be the equivalent of human 8- or 9-year-olds. What had they been doing at the river alone? Where were their parents? Jake found some dried fruit in his pantry and offered it to the children. They looked at it suspiciously at first, but then the larger one reached out and took a piece. They sniffed it and then put it in their mouth. After a moment, their skin turned a brighter green color and they made a happy chirping sound. The smaller child tried some too and seemed to like it. While the children ate, Jake went to the window and looked outside. The grassland was empty and quiet. No sign of anyone coming to look for the children. But their people must be searching for them by now. Kids do not just disappear without someone noticing. He wondered what would happen when the Vakrin found out their children were here with a human. Would they be grateful or angry? The treaty was very clear about humans and Vakrin staying separate. By bringing the children to his ranch, Jake might have violated that treaty. But what else was he supposed to do? Leave them to die in the river? His thoughts were interrupted by a sound outside. It was faint at first, but it grew louder. A rhythmic thumping like drums or like many feet moving together. Jake felt his blood run cold. He went to the window and looked out again. What he saw made him forget all about his pain and his injuries. Coming across the grassland from the direction of the mountains was an army. Dozens and dozens of Vakrin warriors all moving in perfect formation. They wore dark armor and carried long spears that glinted in the sunlight. And at the front of the formation was a massive Vakrin who stood at least a foot taller than all the others. Jake counted quickly. 50 warriors, no, more than that, 70, 100. 100 Vakrin warriors heading straight for his ranch, and there was nowhere to run and no way to fight, and nothing he could do except stand there and wait to see what happened next. The children had heard the sound too. They jumped up from their blankets and ran to the window. When they saw the warriors, their skin flashed through a rapid series of colors. Then they started making excited clicking and whistling sounds. They recognized the warriors. They knew who was coming. Jake took a deep breath and felt his broken ribs stab at him. Whatever was about to happen, he would face it standing up. He had saved these children because it was the right thing to do, and he would not apologize for that. If the Vakrin wanted to punish him for breaking the treaty, then so be it. At least the kids were safe. Jake stood in the doorway of his cabin and watched the Vakrin warriors approach. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The pain from his broken ribs and his cuts seemed to fade away as fear took over. 100 armed warriors were marching toward his home, and he was just one injured human with nothing to defend himself with. The warriors moved in perfect formation like they had trained together for years. Their armor was made from some dark material that looked almost like insect shells, and it gleamed in the double sunlight. The spears they carried had tips that looked like crystal or glass, but they glowed with a soft blue light from inside. Jake had heard rumors that Vakrin weapons used some kind of energy technology, but seeing it in person was different. At the front of the formation was their leader. He was enormous even by Vakrin standards, standing at least 8 feet tall. His armor was more elaborate than the others, with silver patterns worked into the dark surface. His skin was a deep purple color with markings that looked like they might be scars or tattoos. 4 muscular arms hung at his sides, and his golden eyes were fixed on Jake's cabin. The children beside Jake were bouncing up and down with excitement, making loud clicking sounds. They clearly knew who these warriors were, and they were happy to see them. That was probably a good sign, Jake thought. Or maybe not. Maybe they were just happy because they knew the scary human was about to get what was coming to him. The warriors stopped about 30 feet from the cabin. They formed a semicircle around the building, blocking any escape route. Not that Jake could run anywhere in his condition anyway. The leader stepped forward, and the other warriors stayed perfectly still. Jake could feel 100 pairs of golden eyes watching him. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the doorway onto the dirt in front of his cabin. His legs were shaking, but he managed to stay upright. If this was going to be his last day, he would face it like a man. The Vakrin leader was watching him with an expression Jake could not read. Alien faces were hard to understand, and he had no idea what those golden eyes were seeing when they looked at him. Then the two children burst past Jake and ran toward the leader. They were calling out in their clicking language, and their skin was flashing bright, happy colors. The massive Vakrin immediately dropped to his knees, and all 4 of his arms opened wide. The children ran into his embrace, and he wrapped them up, holding them close. Jake understood in that moment. This was their father. The leader of these warriors was the father of the 2 children Jake had pulled from the river. He watched as the big Vakrin held his kids and listened to them chattering away in their language. His skin, which had been dark purple, was now shifting through colors. Golden, green, and blue, and back to purple. Even without understanding Vakrin emotions, Jake could see what was happening. This was relief and joy and love. The children were pointing back at Jake now and talking rapidly. The father looked up at him while still holding his children. His golden eyes met Jake's brown ones, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Jake did not know what to do, so he just stood there and waited. The father gently released his children and stood up to his full height. He was massive and intimidating, and Jake had to crane his neck to look up at his face. The Vakrin took several slow steps forward until he was close enough that Jake could have reached out and touched him. Every instinct Jake had was screaming at him to run, but he held his ground. Then the Vakrin leader did something Jake never expected. He lowered himself down onto one knee. All 4 of his arms crossed over his chest in an X pattern, and he bowed his head. Behind him, every single one of the 100 warriors did the exact same thing. They all knelt and bowed their heads to Jake. Jake stood there in complete shock. His mouth fell open, and he forgot how to breathe for a second. These warriors were kneeling to him, showing him respect or honor or something, because he had saved their leader's children, because he had jumped into a freezing river and risked his life for 2 alien kids he did not even know. The father lifted his head and spoke. His voice was deep and resonant, and the words were in the Vakrin language, which Jake could not understand. But the tone was clear. There was gratitude in that voice. There was emotion that crossed the barrier between species. Jake might not know the words, but he understood the meaning. Thank you. You saved my children. I owe you a debt. Jake found his voice, though it came out rough and shaky. He did not know what to say, so he said the only thing that felt true. They were drowning. Anyone would have helped them. Of course, the Vakrin could not understand his words either. But one of the younger warriors stood up and stepped forward. This one was smaller, and their armor was less decorated. They spoke in heavily accented but clear English. I translate for Father. He says you give his children life. This is greatest gift. He asks what we can do to repay. Jake shook his head. I do not want payment. They were kids. I just did what was right. The translator spoke to the father in rapid Vakrin. The leader responded, and his skin shifted to a warm orange color. The translator turned back to Jake. Father says this is why you are worthy. Not all humans would risk life for Vakrin children. Not all humans see us as people. Those words hit Jake hard. He thought about the colony and how most humans talked about the Vakrin like they were animals or obstacles. He thought about the treaty that kept the 2 species apart because nobody wanted to deal with each other. He looked at the father who was still kneeling and at the 2 children who were watching him with their big golden eyes. They are people. You are all people. Your kids were in trouble and I helped. That is all. The translator spoke again to the father. The big Vakrin stood up and looked at Jake with an expression that might have been a smile. It was hard to tell with alien features, but there was something warm in his eyes. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled something out. It was a crystal about the size of Jake's fist. It glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The father held it out to Jake with 2 of his hands. The translator spoke. This is Life Beacon. If you ever need help, if you ever in danger, you break it. We will come. This is promise of Vakrin people. You saved our children. We will never forget. Jake took the crystal carefully. It was warm in his hands and the light inside it seemed to pulse faster when he touched it. He looked up at the father and nodded. I do not know what to say. Thank you. The father placed one of his large hands on Jake's shoulder. The gesture was gentle despite the Vakran's obvious strength. He spoke again and the translator conveyed the words. Father says you are friend now. Vakran have few friends among humans, but you have shown honor. You have shown that courage and kindness are not owned by one species alone. Jake felt something break open inside his chest. For the first time since Linda died, he felt like maybe he was not completely alone in the universe. Here was this alien being, this father who loved his children just like human fathers did. And he was calling Jake a friend because Jake had done the most basic, decent thing. The father stepped back and gestured to his warriors. They all rose to their feet in one smooth motion. Then they began to move, but not away from the ranch. They spread out across Jake's property and started working. Some headed toward his irrigation system, others moved toward his fields. Jake watched in confusion as they began to repair and improve everything they touched. What are they doing? The translator smiled, or at least it looked like a smile. We repay debt. Your land will prosper now. Your cattle will grow strong. This is small payment for lives of children, but it is beginning. Vakran do not forget their debts. Jake watched in amazement as the Vakran warriors spread across his property and began to work. They moved with incredible efficiency, and their forearms allowed them to do tasks that would take a human twice as long. Some of them headed toward the river where his broken irrigation system was barely holding together. Others moved into his fields where the purple grass grew thin and patchy. The father stayed near Jake along with the translator and the two children. The kids were still chattering excitedly and kept running up to Jake to touch his hands or his arms before running back to their father. Their skin was bright with happy colors, and Jake found himself smiling despite the pain in his ribs. He watched as a group of warriors reached his irrigation system. They examined it for a moment and then began taking it apart. Jake felt a flash of panic because that system was all he had, but the translator must have seen his expression. Do not worry. They make it better. Much better. The warriors worked with tools that Jake had never seen before. Some of the tools glowed like their spears, and when they touched the old pipes, the metal seemed to reshape itself. Within minutes, they had completely rebuilt the irrigation pump using parts from their own equipment. The new pump was smaller and more elegant, and when they activated it, the water began flowing stronger and clearer than it ever had before. Other warriors were doing something to his fields. They had brought containers of what looked like dark soil, or maybe some kind of fertilizer. They spread it across the ground in careful patterns, and wherever it touched, the dirt seemed to darken and become richer. Jake could actually see the grass starting to grow thicker and greener even as he watched. How are they doing that? The translator gestured toward the containers. Special soil treatment, made from mountain minerals and organic compounds. Very good for plant growth. Your fields will produce 3 times normal yield now. Jake felt dizzy, and it was not just from his injuries. These warriors were giving him technology and resources that would change everything. His failing ranch was being transformed right in front of his eyes. He looked at the father who was watching the work with satisfaction. Why are you doing all this? I just pulled your kids out of the river. The father spoke, and the translator conveyed his words. Just pulled them out. You risked your life. You broke your bones, you bled. For children who are not your species. For children whose people you do not know. This is not small thing. This is everything. Jake did not know what to say to that. He had not thought about it in those terms. He had just seen kids in trouble and reacted. But looking at it from the father's perspective, he supposed it was a bigger deal. How many humans would have jumped into that river to save Vakran children? Probably not many. Maybe none. More warriors were approaching now, carrying large crates. They set them down near Jake's cabin and began unpacking them. There were tools inside. Sophisticated equipment that looked brand new. There were building materials, including sheets of some kind of metal that was lighter than aluminum but seemed incredibly strong. There were medical supplies, including what looked like advanced first aid kits. One of the warriors approached Jake carrying a small box. The translator explained, Medicine for your injuries. It will heal broken ribs in 2 days. It will close cuts without scars. Please use. Jake took the box and opened it. Inside were several small vials of glowing liquid and what looked like patches or bandages. He had heard that Vakran medical technology was advanced, but he had never imagined he would get to use it. He looked up at the father. This is too much. I cannot accept all this. The father's skin shifted to a warm gold color and he shook his head. The translator spoke for him. It is not too much. It is not even close to enough. Our children are worth more than all the technology in the world. You gave them back to us. We can never truly repay that debt, but we will try. Jake felt his throat get tight. He thought about Linda and how he would have felt if someone had saved her from the fever. He would have given them everything he owned and it still would not have been enough. He understood what the father was feeling because it was universal. Parents loved their children. That was true whether you were human or Vakrin or anything else, thank you. I will use these things well. The father nodded and then gestured to another group of warriors who were approaching with animals. They were leading a herd of cattle, but these were not like Jake's skinny modified cows. These animals were magnificent. They were larger and healthier with thick muscles and shiny coats. Their eyes were bright and alert, the translator explained. These are mountain cattle. Vakrin breed them for hundreds of years. They are strong and need little food and survive any weather. They are worth much money. We give you 20 to start your herd. Jake stared at the cattle. Each one of these animals was worth more than his entire current herd combined. With 20 of them, he could actually make his ranch profitable. He could sell some and breed others, and within a few years he could be successful instead of barely surviving. Do not know what to say. The father stepped closer and placed one of his hands on Jake's shoulder again. He spoke directly to Jake even though Jake could not understand the words. But somehow the meaning came through anyway in the tone and the look in those golden eyes. The translator provided the words. Father says you do not need to say anything. You already said everything when you jumped in the river. You showed us that humans can be good, that they can be brave and kind, that maybe our two peoples do not need to stay apart. Maybe we can be friends. Maybe we can learn from each other. Jake looked around at all the warriors working on his property. He looked at the two children who were playing near the cabin. He looked at the father who was watching him with respect and gratitude. He thought about how lonely he had been and how hopeless everything had seemed just this morning. I would like that. I would like to be friends. The father's skin turned bright with happy colors. He made a gesture with all four of his arms that might have been a salute or a blessing. Then he spoke again and the translator smiled. Father says this is good day. This is day when everything changes. When humans and Vakrin start new path together. And it started with one brave man who saw children in danger and did not hesitate. The warriors continued their work for another hour. They finished the irrigation system and the field treatments. They unloaded all the supplies and showed Jake how to use some of the more complex equipment. They built a new fence for the cattle using materials that would last 100 years. They even repaired the roof of his cabin and fixed his heating system. When they were finally done, the ranch looked completely different. Everything was clean and functional and new. Jake's small failing property had been transformed into something that could actually succeed. He stood there with the crystal beacon in his hands and the medicine box under his arm, and tried to process what had happened. The father called his warriors back into formation. They assembled quickly and stood at attention. The two children came over to Jake one last time. They each reached out and touched his hands with their small fingers. Their skin was glowing with warm colors and they made soft, happy clicking sounds. Then they ran back to their father. The leader looked at Jake one more time. He spoke and the translator conveyed the final message. Remember the beacon. If you need us, we will come. You are not alone anymore. You have friends in the mountains. You have people who owe you their most precious treasure. We will not forget Jake Morrison. We will tell stories about the human who saved our children. Stories that will last forever. Jake felt tears starting to form in his eyes, but he blinked them back. Thank you. Thank all of you. I will never forget this day. The father raised one hand in farewell. Then he turned and began walking back toward the mountains. The warriors followed in perfect formation, and the two children walked beside their father holding his hands. Jake watched them go until they disappeared into the distance, becoming small dots against the purple landscape. He stood there for a long time after they were gone. The crystal beacon was warm in his hand, still pulsing with its gentle blue light. His ranch was transformed. His life was transformed, and all because he had done the right thing when it mattered. Jake spent the rest of that day exploring everything the Vakrin had done to his property. He could barely believe what he was seeing. The irrigation system now ran so smoothly it made almost no noise at all. The water flowed clear and strong, and the pump seemed to run on some kind of power source he did not understand. There were no fuel tanks or batteries that he could see, but it just kept working perfectly. The fields were already showing dramatic improvement. The purple grass that had been thin and patchy was now growing thick and healthy. The dark treatment the warriors had spread seemed to be some kind of miracle fertilizer. Jake knelt down and felt the soil. It was rich and soft and smelled like growing things. This was soil that could support real crops, not just barely keep struggling grass alive. The new cattle were grazing peacefully in their reinforced enclosure. They were beautiful animals, much larger and healthier than his old herd. Jake counted them again just to make sure. 20 magnificent mountain cattle that were worth a fortune. He still could not quite process that they were his now, that all of this was real. Inside his cabin, he opened the medicine box the warriors had given him. Following the simple picture instructions on the vials, he applied the glowing liquid to his cuts and put the patches on his broken ribs. The effect was immediate. The pain began to fade almost at once, and he could feel a strange tingling sensation as the medicine worked. By the time the sun set, his cuts had stopped bleeding completely, and his ribs only hurt when he moved quickly. He ate dinner that night with a real appetite for the first time in months. The food was the same dried meat and vegetables as always, but somehow it tasted better. Everything felt different now. The cabin did not seem so empty. The future did not seem so hopeless. He had friends now. Alien friends from the mountains who had promised to help him if he ever needed it. As he settled down to sleep that night, Jake held the crystal beacon in his hands and watched it pulse with blue light. He wondered how it worked. Was someone monitoring it right now? Could the Vakrin sense it somehow? He did not know, and it did not matter. What mattered was the promise it represented. He was not alone anymore. The next morning, Jake woke up early as usual, but this time he actually felt rested. His ribs barely hurt at all, and when he unwrapped the bandages, his cuts were almost completely healed. The Vakrin medicine was incredible. Something that would have taken weeks to heal on its own was better in less than a day. He was checking on the new cattle when he saw dust on the horizon. A vehicle was approaching fast across the grassland. As it got closer, Jake recognized it as a colony transport. Someone from the main settlement was coming to visit. That was unusual. Nobody came out to his ranch because nobody cared about a failing rancher on the edge of the territory. The transport pulled up and 3 people got out. Jake recognized them. One was Pete Hamilton, who ran the general store in the colony. Another was Dr. Helen Carter, who worked at the medical clinic. The third was Mayor George Bennett, who was in charge of the whole settlement. They all looked excited and confused. Pete spoke first. "Jake, what in the world happened here? Your irrigation system is running. Your fields look incredible. Where did you get those cattle?" Jake had known this was coming. News traveled fast in small colonies, and someone must have seen the Vakrin warriors marching across the grassland yesterday. He took a deep breath and decided to tell them the truth. "I saved 2 Vakrin children from drowning in the river. Their father came with his warriors to thank me. They fixed up my ranch and gave me gifts." The 3 visitors stared at him in silence. Dr. Carter was the first to speak. "You had contact with the Vakrin. Direct contact. Do you know what that means?" The treaty. Jake felt defensive. What was I supposed to do? Let their kids drown. They were children. Mayor Bennett held up his hands. "Nobody is saying you did wrong, Jake, but this is big news. The Vakrin have not had peaceful contact with humans since the treaty was signed. If they are willing to work with us to help one of our people, this changes everything." Helen stepped forward and looked at Jake with concern. "Are you hurt? Pete said someone saw you bleeding yesterday." Jake pulled back his sleeve to show where the deep cut had been. There was barely a scar. "The Vakrin gave me medicine. It heals incredibly fast." The doctor's eyes went wide. "Can I see this medicine? This could revolutionize our medical care." Jake hesitated. He did not want to give up the medicine, but he also understood how important it could be. If Vakrin healing technology could help other humans, that was worth sharing. "I will show you, but I need to keep some for myself, of course. I just want to study it. See if we can learn how it works." Pete was walking around the property looking at everything. "This is amazing, Jake. Your ranch was barely surviving, and now look at it. You could be one of the most successful ranchers on New Arizona with this setup." Mayor Bennett was more serious. "Jake, we need to talk about what this means for the colony. If the Vakrin are willing to trade with us to share technology and resources, it could change our whole situation here. But we need to be careful. We do not want to mess up this opportunity. What do you want from me? Just tell us what happened. Everything. We need to understand what the Vakrin want and what they expect from us. So Jake told them the whole story. He described pulling the children from the river and nearly drowning himself. He described the march of the 100 warriors and meeting the father. He described the gifts and the promises and the crystal beacon that still sat on his shelf inside the cabin. When he finished, the 3 visitors were quiet for a long moment. Finally, Mayor Bennett spoke. You did something incredible, Jake. Not just saving those kids, but showing the Vakrin that humans can be decent, can be brave and selfless. I think you might have just opened a door that has been closed for too long. What happens now? Bennett thought for a moment. I want to send a message to the Vakrin. Through you. I want to invite their leaders to meet with our colony leadership, to talk about trade and cooperation. Do you think they would come? Jake thought about the father and the translator and the way the warriors had worked on his ranch. I think they might. They seem to want better relations with us, but I cannot promise anything, just try. Use that beacon thing to contact them. Tell them we want to talk. Jake was not sure about this. The beacon was supposed to be for emergencies, not for political meetings. But maybe this was important enough. Maybe this was the start of something that could help both humans and Vakrin. All right, I will try. The visitors left after making Jake promise to contact them as soon as he heard back from the Vakrin. Pete said he would spread the word carefully so people did not panic about Vakrin contact. Helen took a sample of the medicine to study. Bennett said he would start preparing for a possible diplomatic meeting. After they left, Jake went back inside and picked up the crystal beacon. It pulsed warmly in his hands. He felt strange about using it like this, but he also felt like maybe it was the right thing to do. The Vakrin had said they wanted to be friends. Friends talked to each other. Friends worked together. He took the crystal outside and held it up toward the mountains. He did not know if he was supposed to break it or just activate it somehow. He squeezed it gently and the pulsing light got brighter. He squeezed harder and the crystal suddenly flared with brilliant blue light. The light shot up into the sky like a beam reaching toward the clouds. Jake held it for a few seconds and then the light faded back to its normal pulsing. He had no idea if that had worked, but there was nothing to do now except wait. He went back to his work caring for the new cattle and checking the improved irrigation system. Hours passed and he started to think maybe the beacon had not worked. Maybe he had done it wrong. But then, just as the suns were starting to set, he saw movement on the horizon. A group of Vakrin was approaching. Not 100 warriors this time, but a smaller group of maybe 10. Jake recognized the father in the lead with the translator beside him. His heart started pounding. They had come. The beacon had worked. The Vakrin reached his ranch and the father stepped forward. He did not look angry, but his expression was serious. The translator spoke. You use the beacon? Are you in danger? Do you need help? No, I'm fine, but I need to ask you something. The colony leaders want to meet with Vakrin leaders. They want to talk about trade and cooperation. I told them I would ask. The father listened as the translator conveyed Jake's words. His skin shifted through several colors. Then he spoke and the translator repeated his words. This is unexpected, but not unwelcome. We have watched your colony for a long time. We have wondered if humans could be trusted. You have shown us that some can be. We will consider this meeting. We will discuss with our elders.
Give us 3 days.
We will return with answer. Thank you. I know this is a big request. The father stepped closer and placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. You have earned right to ask big requests. You saved our children. If this meeting can bring peace between our peoples, then it is worth considering. We will return in 3 days. The Vakrin left and Jake watched them go. He had done it. He had opened a line of communication between humans and Vakrin. Whatever happened next would change everything for the colony, and maybe for all of New Arizona. The 3 days passed slowly. Jake kept working his ranch, but his mind was elsewhere. The whole colony was buzzing with news about the possible meeting between humans and Vakrin. Some people were excited. Others were nervous. A few were openly hostile, saying the Vakrin could not be trusted, and that Jake had made a mistake. Mayor Bennett came out to the ranch twice to talk strategy. He wanted to know everything Jake could tell him about Vakrin culture and customs. Jake had to admit he did not know much. He had only met them once, and most of that had been through a translator. But he shared what he could about how they seemed to value honor and family, and how their skin showed their emotions. Dr. Carter visited as well. She had been studying the Vakrin medicine and was amazed by what she found. The compounds were unlike anything in human medical science. She said if they could learn to reproduce it or trade for it regularly, it would save countless lives. She asked Jake to request medical knowledge sharing if the meeting went well. Pete Hamilton brought supplies and news from the colony. He said most people were hopeful about the meeting. The colony had been struggling just like Jake's ranch had been. If the Vakrin were willing to trade technology and resources, it could help everyone. But there was also fear. What if the Vakrin wanted something in return that humans could not give? On the morning of the third day, Jake woke before dawn and got dressed in his cleanest clothes. His injuries were completely healed now thanks to the Vakrin medicine. He felt stronger than he had in years. The ranch was running smoothly and the new cattle were thriving. His life had completely changed in less than a week. He saw them coming just as the first sun rose over the horizon. A procession of Vakrin moving slowly and ceremonially across the grassland. This time there were no warriors in armor. Instead, the group was made up of older Vakrin wearing elaborate robes decorated with patterns that seemed to glow. At the front was the father along with several others who carried themselves with obvious authority. Mayor Bennett arrived with a small group from the colony just as the Vakrin reached the ranch. The two groups faced each other across the open ground in front of Jake's cabin. There was a moment of tense silence. Then the father stepped forward and gestured for Jake to join him. Jake walked out to stand between the two groups. The father placed a hand on his shoulder and spoke. The young translator was there again and conveyed the words. "This is Jake Morrison. He saved my children from death. He showed courage and kindness. He has earned the respect of the Vakrin people. We come here today because of him, because he proved that humans and Vakrin can trust each other." Mayor Bennett stepped forward and nodded respectfully to the father. "We are grateful for this opportunity to meet. Jake has told us of your generosity and your honor. We hope to build a friendship between our peoples." The father listened to the translation and then responded. The translator spoke his words. "We have been separate for too long. The treaty kept peace, but it also kept us apart. We did not know humans. You did not know us. This made fear. Fear makes conflict. We want no conflict," Bennett agreed. "Neither do we. We came to New Arizona to build a new life. We do not want war. We want to live peacefully and prosper. If we can help each other do that, then everyone benefits." One of the older Vakrin stepped forward. This one had skin that was a deep silver color marked with black patterns. The translator indicated this was an elder named Vekrish who spoke for the Vakrin Council. "We have much that humans need. Technology, medicine, knowledge of this world. But what do humans have that we need?" Bennett had prepared for this question. "We have our own technology and knowledge, things the Vakrin might find useful. We have mining equipment and techniques. We have agricultural methods. We have engineering and construction skills. We are willing to share all of this in exchange for cooperation." Elder Vekresh considered this. His skin shifted to a thoughtful blue color. "And what of the land? The treaty gave humans the flatlands and Vakrin the mountains. Will humans try to take more?" "No," Bennett was firm. "We respect the treaty boundaries. We only want to use the land we were given and use it well. We do not need more territory. We need knowledge to make our territory productive." Another elder stepped forward. This one was female with skin that showed purple and gold patterns. The translator identified her as Elder Miriah. She spoke and the translator conveyed her words. "There is another concern. Not all humans are like Jake Morrison. Some in your colony speak against us. Some want us gone from New Arizona entirely. How do we know we can trust you?" Bennett sighed. He knew she was right. There were bigots in the colony who hated the Vakrin just for being different. "I cannot promise that all humans will accept you, just like I am sure not all Vakrin accept us. But I can promise that our government will protect any agreements we make. We will punish anyone who breaks the peace." The father spoke up. "We have same problem. Some of our people fear humans. Think you will take everything like humans did on other worlds. But I tell them about Jake. I tell them one human risked his life for our children. This proves not all humans are bad. Some have honor." Jake listened to all of this feeling the weight of responsibility. These two groups were trying to build something important and somehow he had become the symbol of it. The human who showed that trust was possible. He hoped he could live up to that. Elder Vekresh spoke again. "We propose an exchange. A trade to test this cooperation. We will provide medical technology and soil treatments to your colony. You will provide mining equipment and training. We will see if both sides keep their promises." Bennett nodded eagerly. "That sounds fair. We can start small and build trust gradually. And we propose cultural exchange." The translator continued conveying Vekresh's words. "Young Vakran will visit colony to learn human ways. Young humans will visit our settlements to learn our ways. Understanding comes from knowing each other. I agree completely. The more our peoples interact, the less we will fear each other." The elders spoke among themselves in their clicking language for several minutes. Their skin colors shifted as they debated. Finally, Elder Mariah stepped forward again. "We have decided. We will begin this cooperation. But we make Jake Morrison the bridge between our peoples. He has proven worthy. Both humans and Vakran trust him. He will oversee the first exchanges and make sure both sides honor their commitments." Jake felt his eyes go wide. "Me. I am just a rancher. I do not know anything about diplomacy or trade." The father smiled, or at least made an expression that looked like a smile. "That is exactly why you are right person. You are honest. You are fair. You care about doing right thing, not about politics or power. Both sides will trust you." Bennett looked at Jake and nodded. "I think they are right. You have become important to both communities. Will you do this?" Jake thought about Linda and how she had always believed in helping people. She would have wanted him to do this. He thought about the 2 children playing by the river before they nearly drowned. He thought about everything that had changed in just a few days. "All right, I will do it. I will try my best." The father placed both of his lower hands on Jake's shoulders while raising his upper hands in what seemed to be a gesture of blessing. "You saved my children. Now you will help save our peoples from hatred and fear. You will be remembered forever. Jake Morrison." The elders and the mayor spent the next few hours working out the details of the agreement. They would start with small exchanges of technology and knowledge. Jake would coordinate everything from his ranch, which would become a neutral meeting place. Both sides would send representatives regularly to check progress and address any problems. As the meeting ended and both groups prepared to leave, the father pulled Jake aside. He handed him another crystal, this one red instead of blue. "This is communication crystal. You speak into it, and I will hear you no matter the distance. Use it whenever you need. We are partners now in building peace." Jake took the crystal and nodded. "Thank you for trusting me. I will not let you down, I know you will not. That is why we chose you." The Vakran departed back toward the mountains, and the colony representatives headed back to the settlement. Jake stood alone on his ranch, holding 2 crystals and feeling like the weight of 2 worlds was resting on his shoulders. But he also felt something else: pride, purpose, hope. He had come to New Arizona with dreams of a better life and had lost almost everything. But in saving 2 children from drowning, he had found a new dream. A dream of 2 different peoples learning to live together in peace. And somehow, against all odds, he was going to help make that dream real. 6 months had passed since the meeting between the Vakran and the human colonists. Jake's ranch had become the center of a transformation that nobody could have predicted. What started as one poor rancher saving 2 children had grown into something much larger. Something that was changing life on New Arizona for everyone. The first technology exchange had gone smoothly. The Vakran had provided medical supplies and soil, treatments just as promised. Dr. Carter and her team had learned how to use the Vakran medicines, and the colony's hospital was now saving lives that would have been lost before. Colonists who got sick or injured healed faster and better than ever. The fear of disease that had haunted the settlement for years was finally easing. The soil treatments had been distributed to all the farms and ranches in the colony. Crops that had struggled in the alien dirt were now thriving. The grasslands that had been sparse and weak were growing thick and healthy. Food production had tripled, and for the first time since the colony was founded, people were not worried about starving through the winter. In return, the humans had provided mining, equipment, and expertise to the Vakran. The mountain people had always known there were valuable minerals in their territory, but they had lacked the tools to extract them efficiently. Human engineers had shown them techniques that allowed them to mine, without damaging their sacred sites or polluting their lands. Both peoples were benefiting from the arrangement, but more important than the technology and resources was the cultural exchange. Young Vakran visited the colony regularly now, and human students traveled to the mountain settlements. Children from both species played together and learned each other's languages. The fear and suspicion that had kept them apart for so long was slowly being replaced by curiosity and friendship. Jake's ranch had expanded significantly. With the Vakrin technology and the mountain cattle, his herd had grown to over 100 animals. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he shared everything he had learned. His property now included a meeting hall that had been built jointly by human and Vakrin workers. It was a beautiful building that combined both architectural styles and served as the main location for trade negotiations and cultural gatherings. He was standing in front of that meeting hall one morning when he saw a familiar group approaching. The father was leading a small procession, and Jake could see the two children walking beside him. They had grown so much in 6 months. They were taller and their movements were more confident, but they still ran ahead when they saw Jake calling out greetings in accented but clear English. Jake knelt down and let the children hug him. They had visited many times over the past months and had become like family to him. He had taught them about human culture, and they had taught him about Vakrin traditions. Their names were Kellen and Serena, and they were smart and funny and reminded him every day why he had jumped into that freezing river. The father approached with his usual dignified walk. His skin showed warm colors, indicating he was pleased. "Jake, my friend, it is good to see you again." Jake stood and clasped the father's hand in the way they had developed as a greeting between their peoples. "Good to see you too, Varric. What brings you out today?" Varric gestured to the others in his group. "We bring news. The Council of Elders has made decision. Important decision." They walked into the meeting hall and sat around the large table that dominated the central room. Varric's expression became serious. "The Elders have been watching the progress of our cooperation for these 6 months. They have seen the benefits. They have seen humans and Vakrin working together peacefully. They believe it is time to make this arrangement permanent." "What do you mean?" Varric's skin shifted to a formal purple color. "We propose to dissolve the old treaty, the one that kept our peoples separate. We propose a new treaty, one that makes humans and Vakrin equal partners on New Arizona. Shared territories, shared resources, shared future." Jake felt his heart racing. This was huge. This was everything they had been working toward, but he had not expected it to happen so soon. "Does the colony leadership know about this?" "Not yet. We wanted to tell you first. You are the bridge between us. We need to know if you think humans will accept this proposal." Jake thought carefully. There were still some colonists who did not trust the Vakrin. There were still some who wanted to keep the old boundaries. But most people had seen the benefits of cooperation. Most people wanted this to continue. "I think they will accept it. I think most humans have realized we are stronger together than apart." "Good. Then we will present the proposal formally next week, at the gathering we have planned." The gathering Varric mentioned was a celebration that had been scheduled to mark 6 months of successful cooperation. Both humans and Vakrin would attend. There would be food and music and demonstrations of shared achievements. It was supposed to be a simple party, but now it would become the setting for a historic decision. Over the next week, Jake worked with both Mayor Bennett and the Vakrin elders to prepare for the announcement. Bennett was enthusiastic about the new treaty. He said it would allow the colony to truly thrive instead of just survive. The elders were equally positive, saying that isolation had held the Vakrin back, and that learning from humans had already improved their lives. The day of the gathering arrived with perfect weather. Both suns were shining and the sky was clear. People began arriving at Jake's ranch early in the morning. Humans came from the colony in transports and on foot. Vakrin came down from the mountains in long processions. By midday, there were over 500 people gathered on the grassland around the meeting hall. Tables had been set up with food from both cultures. Human dishes like roasted meat and bread sat alongside Vakrin delicacies made from mountain plants and fruits. Children ran around playing games that mixed human and Vakrin rules. Musicians from both peoples played together, creating strange but beautiful harmonies. Jake watched it all, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. 6 months ago, he had been alone and poor and hopeless. Now he was surrounded by friends from 2 species. His ranch had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. He thought about Linda and wished she could have seen this. She would have loved it. As the afternoon wore on, Mayor Bennett and Elder Vekrish stood up to speak. The crowd gathered around to listen. Bennett spoke first. 6 months ago, one man showed us what courage and compassion could accomplish. Jake Morrison saved 2 Vakran children without thinking about politics or treaties or differences. He just saw people who needed help and he helped them. That simple act opened a door that had been closed for too long. Elder Vekresh spoke next with a translator conveying his words. We Vakran had feared humans. We thought you would be like the stories we heard from other worlds, greedy and violent and destructive. But Jake Morrison proved those stories wrong. He showed us that humans could be brave and kind and honorable. He showed us that we could trust you, Bennett continued. Today we are here to celebrate what we have built together. Better medicine, better farming, better lives for everyone. But more than that, we are here to celebrate friendship, understanding, peace. And we are here to propose something new. Vekresh's skin glowed with significance. We propose to end the separation between our peoples. We propose a new treaty that makes us true partners on this world. Equal voices, equal rights, equal responsibilities. A murmur went through the crowd. Some people looked excited. Others looked uncertain. Bennett raised his hand for quiet. This is a big decision. It will change everything about how we live on New Arizona. But I believe it is the right decision. I believe we are better together than apart. The colony leadership supports this new treaty. The Vakran elders all stepped forward, showing their agreement. The crowd began to cheer, humans and Vakran together raising their voices in celebration. Jake felt tears in his eyes, but he did not try to hide them. This was a moment worth crying over. Varric found Jake in the crowd and pulled him aside. The father's skin was bright with happy colors. You did this. You made this possible. One act of courage changed the future of 2 species. I just pulled some kids out of a river. Everyone else did the real work. No. Varric shook his head. You showed us it was possible to trust. Without that trust, none of this would have happened. You are a hero, Jake Morrison. To both our peoples, the celebration continued into the night. As the sun set and the moons rose, people sat around fires telling stories and sharing songs. Jake sat with Varric and his children and listened to the sounds of 2 cultures becoming one. He thought about how strange life was, how one moment of decision could change everything. If he had not gone to check the irrigation system that morning, he would never have heard the children drowning. If he had hesitated even for a second, they would have died. But he had gone, and he had not hesitated, and because of that, everything was different now. Later that night, after most people had gone home, Jake stood alone, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. The red communication crystal was warm in his pocket. The blue beacon crystal sat on a shelf in his cabin waiting for an emergency that would probably never come. His ranch was prosperous. The colony was thriving. The Vakran were his friends. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Kellen and Serena approaching with their father. The children looked sleepy but happy. Varric placed a hand on Jake's shoulder.